What would you do if your husband destroyed your life? From 7,000 miles away, I was standing under the harsh, flickering light of the comms tent at Forward Operating Base, Lightning in Afghanistan, when I opened the email that changed everything. The generators rumbled outside, a radio cracked with distant static, and the smell of diesel and dust lingered in the air. But all I could see were the 17 words staring back at me on the screen. I've moved on. The money's mine. The house is mine. Good luck over there. That was it. No hello, no explanation, no warning. Just those cold, dismissive lines that turned my world upside down in an instant. My name is Lauren Bishop. I'm 35 years old, a captain in the United States Army, and I was halfway through my third deployment when my husband Eric decided to erase our marriage via email. I scrolled down praying there was some mistake. But no, there were attachments. Divorce papers. Bank statements showing our joint account had been emptied, $38,000 gone. And the final dagger photos of a young blonde woman lounging on my living room couch, her feet on the coffee table I had saved for months to buy, wearing my necklace, drinking from my favorite mug. Her name, according to the email signature, was Brittany Hart, 22 years old. And this is rich. She'd already updated her Instagram bio to future Mrs. Bishop. I stared at her smug smile frozen on the screen and felt something break inside me. Not just from the betrayal, but from the fact that I wasn't there. I was here thousands of miles away giving everything I had to serve my country, while Eric played house with a woman young enough to be his intern. The betrayal didn't come with fireworks or screaming matches, it came with silence. The kind that makes your breath catch and your hands go numb. I sat motionless for what felt like an eternity, the only sound in my ears the buzz of the fluorescent light above and the faint thumping of helicopters in the distance. I had slept in concrete bunkers, endured mortar attacks, watched medics perform life-saving surgery with nothing but headlamps and adrenaline. I thought I knew pain, but this was different. This wasn't combat, this was personal. Eric had always underestimated me. He saw the soldier who folded laundry between field exercises, the woman who FaceTimed him on breaks from medical briefings, the wife who sent care packages during her own deployment. But what he never saw, what he would soon learn, is that beneath the surface, I had always been preparing, not just for war overseas, but for the war that could one day arrive at home. I closed my laptop. The metal casing felt hot under my palms, as if it too had absorbed the heat of betrayal. I stood up and stepped outside into the crisp night air of the Afghan desert. The sky overhead glittered with stars, so many they didn't even seem real. I looked up at them and felt something settle in me, something cold, focused, determined. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, I returned to the base's medical facility. I was stationed here as a trauma officer, working rotations, treating everything from sprained ankles to life-threatening wounds. But today, the patients felt blurrier than usual. My mind kept circling the same thoughts, the email, the photos, the smug tone in his voice that somehow managed to bleed through a typed message. Staff Sergeant Martinez, one of our best field medics, glanced at me as I checked a chart. "You okay, Captain? You seem distracted." I forced a smile. Just tired. Long night. But it wasn't fatigue. It was clarity. The kind that arrives when someone reveals exactly who they are. Eric and I had been married for 8 years together, for 10. We met back when I was a young lieutenant, freshly graduated from officer candidate school. He was working at a sports bar near Fort Campbell, charming, funny, and seemingly understanding of the military lifestyle. Or so I believed. Looking back, the warning signs were obvious. The disappearing acts with vague excuses. The sudden business ventures that went nowhere. His growing resentment toward my rank, my deployments, my ambition. By my second deployment, the emails had turned into complaints about the bills, the loneliness, the unfairness of it all. By this third one, he had barely bothered to check in. And now, I understood why. But here's the thing. Soldiers don't just plan for the enemy in front of them. We plan for every scenario, every blind spot. And years ago, back when Eric first started talking about combining finances and streamlining everything under one name, I got curious, then cautious. I met with a JAG officer before my second deployment. Her name was Major Patricia Holmes. Sharp, no nonsense. She told me stories that chilled my blood service members coming home to bankruptcies, evictions, drained savings, all courtesy of the spouse they left behind. Deployment stress breaks marriages, she said. And when it does, the spouse at home usually controls the money, the narrative, and the house. Well, you need to protect yourself. So I did. I set up a military spouse protection trust, something most people don't even know exists. It legally separated my military income and assets from our joint accounts. On paper, Eric had access to a sliver of our wealth, just enough to make it look normal. The rest, tied up, protected, and fortified under military law with serious consequences for anyone who tried to tamper with it. Eric had no idea. I waited until nightfall to respond. The mess tent had mostly emptied out. A few soldiers played cards in the corner. The generators hummed outside like distant thunder. I sat with my laptop open again, blinking at that same smug email. I typed 5 words, "Are you sure about that?" Then I hit send. He'd read it and laugh, I knew it. He'd assume I was bluffing, desperate, powerless. But what he didn't know was that I had already gathered my intelligence, fortified my defenses, and was ready to strike. This wasn't a cry for help. It was a declaration of war, and Eric Bishop had just become my target. The days that followed felt like a blur of routine and calculation. I treated wounded soldiers, managed charts, conducted briefings, but underneath it all, my mind was operating on an entirely different battlefield. Eric thought he'd made the first move, but in reality, he'd just walked into a trap I'd started building years ago. When I first told Eric I was setting up a separate trust for my military earnings, I framed it like a financial buffer just in case the base has payroll issues, I'd said. He'd nodded, uninterested, already focused on his next scheme to flip motorcycles or launch a podcast about fantasy football. He never asked questions. He never wanted details. That disinterest was his downfall. He assumed because I loved him, I would never guard myself against him. He mistook compassion for weakness, and he'd always laughed off my tendency to over-prepare, like when I packed a go bag for emergencies or insisted on keeping hard copies of every financial document. "You act like the apocalypse is coming," he used to joke. Turns out it did, and his name was Eric. Back at the base, I composed a new email, this one not to Eric, but to Major Patricia Holmes. I forwarded every document, his message, the bank withdrawals, the photos of Brittany. I added a quick note, time to activate the protections. Within the hour, Major Holmes responded, "Captain Bishop, I've received your materials. We're initiating immediate protective measures under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. The bank accounts he accessed will be frozen. We're also notifying federal authorities of the unauthorized withdrawals. Please remain available for further coordination." Reading that, I felt something I hadn't felt since the email relief. Not the passive kind that drifts in with hope, but the fierce, steel-edged kind. The kind that comes when you know the cavalry has arrived and you're not fighting alone. What Eric didn't understand was that financial abuse of a deployed service member isn't just morally reprehensible, it's a federal crime. And under military protection statutes, the consequences are swift and severe. My civilian attorney back home, Rebecca Chen, responded just as fast. "Lauren, we've obtained an emergency court order freezing all accounts accessed by your husband. Bank records show the withdrawals began 3 weeks ago. We've also confirmed the house deed is in your name only as the trust stipulates. He had no legal right to claim it. We've secured the property." That last part made me pause. Eric wasn't just locked out of the money, he was out of the house. Rebecca's next line was even better. "Per your neighbor's report, Eric and Brittany were removed by sheriff's deputies yesterday morning. They did not take it well." I nearly laughed. I could picture it. Eric bleary-eyed in the kitchen, opening the front door, expecting DoorDash, only to find deputies and a court order. Brittany probably screamed. Or maybe she tried to argue. But the truth is, The law was on my side, and so was the evidence. The emails kept coming. Court confirmations, property security updates, FBI interest. That's right, the FBI. Major Holmes sent one final note that day that made everything click into place. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division has accepted the case due to the federal protections involved. Agent Martinez will be leading the investigation. Your husband is facing charges including wire fraud theft from a government employee and violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. We believe we have one of the strongest cases of military spouse financial abuse in recent years. I stared at the message for a long time. 8 years of marriage, 10 years of trust. And now the man I had once called my partner was facing serious federal charges, all because he thought he could outmaneuver a deployed officer. I walked out into the desert air again, letting the silence of the night wrap around me. The sky above was vast and ancient, the stars cold and bright. I inhaled deeply and let it go. Eric had made his move. I had made mine, but the game wasn't over yet. 2 days later, during a morning briefing, my laptop pinged. I muted the screen and waited until I was alone. It was an email from Eric. Subject line, "Please call me. Urgent." I opened it slowly, half expecting more gloating. Instead, what I saw was panic masquerading as negotiation. "Lauren, I think there's been some kind of mistake. The police came and said I'm under federal investigation. My accounts are frozen. I have to leave the house. This is insane. I know you're upset about the divorce, but this is going too far. Can't we work this out like adults? I'll give you half the money back if you stop the lawyers. Please call me." My phone might get disconnected soon. This is ruining my life. I stared at it, stunned by the sheer arrogance. No apology, no remorse, not even an acknowledgement of what he had done, just disbelief that his actions had consequences. I forwarded the email to Major Holmes with a short note. "Assume this means everything is proceeding as expected." Her reply was instant. Indeed. Agent Martinez confirmed Eric Bishop retained a public defender today. His assets are frozen. No private attorney would touch the case. Brittany left 2 days ago. Her social media says she moved back in with her parents in Florida and claims ignorance of the crimes. I almost felt bad for Brittany. But then I remembered her wearing my necklace, sitting on my couch, posting photos of herself in my house while I was dodging mortar fire. She might have been ignorant, but she was still complicit in enjoying the spoils of my sacrifice. Staff Sergeant Martinez found me later that evening near the medical bay. "Captain," he said quietly, "I don't know what you're going through, but my wife had something similar happen during my first deployment. Her ex cleaned out the accounts, ran off with someone else. Military legal helped her. Took 2 years, but she got everything back. He ended up doing time." I looked at him. "How's she doing now?" He smiled. "Married again. To someone who deserves her." I nodded. "Sometimes," he said, "the worst thing that happens to you ends up being the best thing." As I walked back to my bunk, I held on to those words. Eric had tried to destroy me. He'd underestimated me, thought he could bury me in betrayal. But instead, he had handed me the blueprint to burn his lies to the ground. The 3rd week of my deployment was when everything started to move at lightning speed. I received a secure message from Major Holmes, this time marked urgent. Instead of email, she was calling me directly. A satellite phone call from the States, cutting through the distance and time zones like a missile. "Captain Bishop," she said, her voice crackling through the line. "I wanted to personally update you on new developments in your case. Agent Martinez uncovered additional evidence, and it changes everything." I straightened on the edge of my bunk, heart pounding. What kind of evidence? She didn't sugarcoat it. Your husband didn't just drain your accounts. He's been running a multi-layered fraud scheme using your military credentials. My stomach dropped. He forged your signature on applications for credit cards, opened a second mortgage on the house, and secured a $40,000 personal loan using your service record as leverage. So far, the total fraud exceeds $100,000. I sat frozen, the weight of that number pressing down on me like enemy fire. $100,000 stolen in my name, while I was eating MREs and patching up wounded soldiers. Major Holmes continued. The scale of this operation qualifies him for multiple federal charges: bank fraud, identity theft, forgery, wire fraud, and additional violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. If convicted, he's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. The line went quiet for a moment, letting it all settle in. My mind raced through every document I'd ever signed, every email I'd ignored from banks or lenders, every time Eric had told me, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." He hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He'd tried to erase me financially, dismantle my identity, but instead of succeeding, he'd triggered the very protections I had put in place to prevent this exact scenario. When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. Then slowly, a strange satisfaction crept in. Eric had used my name, my status, my sacrifice, and now it was all coming back to destroy him. The next email from Rebecca Chen, my civilian attorney, was short but explosive. Eric was arrested this morning at 6:00 a.m. He was trying to board a Greyhound to Florida. He had a fake ID, $5,000 in cash money traced to the fraudulent loans. I pictured it with ease. Him at the bus terminal trying to vanish like a coward, thinking he could run, but the net had already closed around him. Rebecca continued. The arrest made local news. Headline: Local man arrested for defrauding deployed military wife. The article mentioned your Bronze Star, your deployments. The public is overwhelmingly on your side. I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. Captain Rodriguez looked up from across the briefing table. "Everything okay, Bishop?" I just tilted my screen toward him, showing the headline. He raised his eyebrows. "Damn. Remind me never to cross you." Eric's obsession with his public image had always been his Achilles heel. He hated being seen as a failure, a loser, or God forbid, a villain. And now the entire town knew the truth, that he was a liar, a fraud, and a criminal who stole from the woman serving overseas to protect the very freedoms he was abusing. Justice wasn't just coming, it was broadcasting. The fallout didn't stop there. Major Holmes emailed again the next day. Eric has accepted a plea deal, 12 years in federal prison, full restitution of $147,000 including penalties and interest. He forfeits all marital assets and will not contest the divorce. 12 years. For the man who once said he could never live without me. The man who promised to be my partner through everything. He was now a felon locked into a sentence almost twice as long as our marriage had lasted. But the most poetic part, the restitution. He had tried to leave me broke, homeless, vulnerable. Instead, the penalties and interest had made me wealthier than before. His crimes had literally funded my comeback. Rebecca's follow-up was equally satisfying. The fraudulent second mortgage has been voided. You now have clear title to the house. Your credit has been fully restored. The predatory loan has been reassigned solely to Eric. He bears all future responsibility. I couldn't help but smile. The man who tried to dismantle my life would now spend the next decade answering to a system he never respected. Every piece of furniture he bought, every lie he told, every stolen dollar, it was all documented, all calculated, all accounted for. As I walked outside that evening, the sun dipping behind the jagged Afghan mountains, I felt something new. Peace. Not because I'd won, not because I'd gotten the house or the money or the law on my side, but because I had never lost myself. Through the betrayal, the violation, the fear, through the war back home and the war in front of me, I had remained who I was: a soldier, a planner, a survivor, and most of all, a woman no one should ever underestimate. 3 months later, I stepped off the plane at Nashville International Airport. I had completed my third deployment, but this return was different. There was no one waiting at baggage claim with a welcome home sign, no husband, no familiar arms wrapping around me in relief, just humid Tennessee air wrapping around my face, thick and sticky, and oddly comforting after months of dry desert winds. But that didn't mean I was alone. My sister Jenna spotted me before I even cleared the terminal. She burst through the security barrier with the same fiery energy she'd had since childhood. We hadn't spoken much while I was deployed, just the occasional email, a few quick updates. I hadn't told her the full story. Now, as we tossed my duffel into her car and pulled away from the airport, she glanced sideways at me. "You gonna tell me why your ex-husband's mugshot is all over local news?" she asked, only half joking. I exhaled. 12 years, I said. Federal prison for stealing from a deployed service member. Her jaw dropped. 12 years. For real wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, bank fraud. They stacked the charges like pancakes. She let out a long whistle, then shook her head. Damn. He always gave me bad vibes, but I didn't think he was that stupid. Oh, he was smart, I replied. Just not smarter than a woman trained to dismantle hostile operations. The drive to Clarksville felt surreal. Familiar sights zipped past the windows, the faded billboard for barbecue, the long stretch of highway, where Eric once taught me how to drive stick shift, the corner gas station, where we used to argue over scratch-offs. But every memory had a new edge to it now, like looking at old photos and suddenly seeing the cracks you missed the first time. As we turned onto my street, my stomach twisted. There it was, my house. It looked exactly the same shutters, same walkway. Even the hanging wind chimes I'd bought on a whim 2 summers ago were still clinking gently in the breeze. But everything about it felt different now. It wasn't a shared home anymore. It wasn't haunted by his footsteps or her perfume. It was mine, legally, emotionally, unquestionably mine. Jenna parked in the driveway and stared with a half smile. "Well, you gonna cry, or do you want me to grab your bags first?" Before I could answer, our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, came bustling over from across the street, practically vibrating with excitement. "Lauren, oh honey, welcome home," she cried, wrapping me in a grandmotherly hug that smelled like gardenias and menthol cream. "Thank you for watching the house, Mrs. Patterson. I heard it got eventful," she clucked her tongue. "That man of yours made a scene when the police came, screaming about injustice and it's all a misunderstanding. I told them I'd been keeping notes. His little girlfriend ran out of here like a scared rabbit." I smiled. Well, I hope she found the door easily. That house was never hers to begin with. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "Are you doing okay, dear? This must have been so hard." I turned and looked at the house again, at the porch I had swept every fall, at the bedroom where I had stared at the ceiling for countless nights, wondering if love was supposed to feel that lonely. Then I looked at my sister, at the packed boxes waiting inside, at the clean title resting in my deployment folder, and I answered truthfully. "Actually, Mrs. Patterson, I'm doing better than okay." Inside the house smelled like lavender and fresh paint. Rebecca had sent in a cleaning service before my return, and the stale bitterness that once lingered in the walls had been scrubbed away. I walked slowly through each room. My boots echoed on the hardwood. The place was emptier. Now Eric's clutter, his games, his chaos were all gone, but the silence didn't feel hollow. It felt peaceful. And in the middle of that peace, I found something deeper. Clarity. This house wasn't the reward. It was the reminder that I had trusted someone who didn't deserve it and still survived. That I had loved someone who weaponized my absence and still came home stronger. And that even when everything was stacked against me, distance, deception, betrayal, I had planned ahead. I had protected myself. I had won. I spent the rest of the evening unpacking, quietly pausing occasionally to let the silence sink in, to really let it feel like freedom. That night, I stood on the back porch, watching the stars blink into view. The sky here wasn't as vast as in Afghanistan, but it was mine. Jenna brought out 2 glasses of iced tea and sat beside me. So she said, "What now?" I didn't hesitate. "I start fresh. I rebuild. I live." She nodded. "You ever think about dating again?" I laughed. "Let me reclaim my mortgage first." She chuckled, then leaned in with a grin. "Just promise me you'll make them pass a background check next time." I raised my glass. At minimum, but as I sat there sipping sweet tea under the stars, I wasn't thinking about Eric. Not really. I was thinking about every woman who had been blindsided by betrayal and forced to claw her way back, and how I wanted them to know you can prepare, you can protect, and you can win. In the weeks following my return, the dust settled, but the echoes didn't. Eric's downfall had become local legend in Clarksville. The story spread like wildfire, especially after the Tennessean Gazette ran a full feature with the headline, "Bronze Star Veteran Outsmarts Cheating Husband While Deployed." It wasn't just a story of justice, it was a symbol, something people could rally behind, something people whispered about at coffee shops and shared on Facebook like modern folklore. I'd walk into the grocery store and feel eyes on me, not with pity, but with something closer to awe. Women smiled softly, men nodded respectfully, and every so often a stranger would stop and say something like, "You showed all of us how to fight with dignity." I hadn't planned for that. I didn't take action for applause, but I won't lie, it felt good. Not because I wanted to be famous, but because the truth was finally louder than the lies. Eric's version of our marriage had always been slippery. He painted himself as the struggling husband of an overcommitted soldier, left behind while I chased medals. I'd heard him say it at barbecues in offhand jokes, even to my own friends. He played the victim so convincingly that sometimes I even questioned myself. But now his truth was on trial and mine had won. And not just in court. Whispers circulated about how long he'd been scheming. One of Eric's old friends from his gym messaged me anonymously on Instagram. Not surprised. He used to brag that you'd never find out, said you were too mission-focused to notice if he emptied your wallet. That message hit differently, because it proved something I had long suspected, that this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness or some tragic accident of loneliness. It was a long game, a con, a calculated betrayal. And I had beat him at his own game. But the rumors didn't stop at Eric. Some folks started questioning Brittany's role in all this. She'd claimed she knew nothing, but a few of her social media posts told a murkier story. Designer bags, champagne nights, captions like, "When your man provides the life you deserve." A friend of hers commented, "Thought you said he was a contractor for the army, not that he was married to one." The post was deleted quickly, but screenshots floated around. People talked. And even though Brittany had been granted immunity for her cooperation, her name was now entangled with scandal. Some said she moved back in with her parents in Florida. Others said she changed her name. I didn't care. The story wasn't about her anymore. It was about me taking back what was mine and showing women everywhere that you don't have to accept betrayal quietly. You can be graceful but still fierce. You can be calm but still lethal. One afternoon, I got a message from Staff Sergeant Martinez's wife. We'd never met in person, but her words hit me square in the chest. "Thank you for sharing your story. What happened to you happened to me too. But I didn't know how to fight back. Now I do." I sat there reading it over and over again, my eyes welling up with something I hadn't expected connection. That's what this had become. It wasn't just about a cheating husband or a ruined marriage. It was about the thousands of men and women serving in places far from home, trusting their lives, and sometimes their life savings, to the wrong people. And it was about proving that there is a way to fight back with systems, with strategy, and with strength. The day before Eric's formal sentencing, I got a call from Rebecca. "Lauren," she said, "we just received notice. The judge approved full financial restitution enforcement. That means not just the $147,000, but any future income he earns while incarcerated will go toward repaying you." I blinked. "You mean, like wages?" "Exactly. He's not just serving time. He's working for you now." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A long, full-bodied laugh that echoed off my kitchen walls. The man who tried to bankrupt me while I wore body armor in 120-degree heat was now legally bound to pay me back cent by cent, no matter how long it took. There's a special kind of irony in poetic justice, and Eric was now living in it. I forwarded the news to Major Holmes with a single line, "Justice served," with interest. She replied 5 minutes later, "And dessert on the way." I've often heard that some victories are quiet. They don't come with parades or applause. They don't feel like movie endings. They arrive slowly like sunlight creeping through blinds, warming you piece by piece until you realize you're free. 3 months after the sentencing, I stood in my backyard, bare feet in the grass, sipping my morning coffee. It was the same yard I used to mow while Eric sat inside watching ESPN, the same one where we'd once dreamed of building a deck someday. Now it was mine, all of it, and I didn't need his someday anymore. I had my today. I'd returned to active duty back at Fort Campbell, but was on leave that week, finally settling into civilian rhythms. For the first time in years, I wasn't worrying about who was checking my email, whether my bank account would be intact when I woke up, or who was pretending to love me while hiding knives behind their back. That morning, I received one final package from Rebecca Chen. Inside was the official divorce decree, signed, sealed, final, along with a check restitution payment number 1. It wasn't huge, a few $100s scraped from whatever correctional job Eric had been assigned, but it felt weighty, symbolic. It was, after all, the first brick in rebuilding what he had tried to destroy. Attached to the check was a typed note from Rebecca Lauren. Your case has already changed how our firm approaches military family protection. We're now offering pro bono consultations for all deployed service members. Your fight became more than just a personal battle. It's become a precedent. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I cried. Not because I was sad, not because I was still angry, but because for the first time since that night in Afghanistan, the night the email shattered my peace, I felt whole. What Eric did to me wasn't just betrayal. It was invasive, calculated sabotage. He didn't just cheat on me, he tried to erase me, financially, emotionally, socially, and he failed, miserably. He failed to account for the woman who plans for contingencies, who reads fine print, who memorizes protocols and contingency maps, and always has an escape route in place. He failed to realize that betrayal is a weapon, but so is preparation. In the end, I never raised my voice, never begged, never stooped to threats or chaos. I let the systems I trusted, JAG my trust attorney, federal law enforcement, do what they were designed to do. Eric, meanwhile, had tried to burn everything down with a single smug email. Instead, all he torched was his own future. 12 years behind bars, reputation ruined, assets seized, publicly shamed and privately discarded, and every paycheck he earns in that cell goes straight to me. Poetic. People often ask me now, if you could say one thing to him, what would it be? My answer's simple. Thank you for underestimating me. Because without his betrayal, I might have spent another 10 years cleaning up after his failures, nurturing his ego, sacrificing my dreams for his delusions. I might have never realized the full reach of my strength, my intelligence, my planning, my discipline. I might have never discovered how lethal grace can be when paired with justice. So if you're listening, if you've been through betrayal, manipulation, emotional sabotage, I want you to hear this. You don't have to scream to be powerful. You don't have to take revenge with fire to burn someone to ash. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is letting them destroy themselves with their own choices and walking away with everything they thought they stole. So here I am, Lauren Bishop, Army captain, Bronze Star recipient, federal fraud survivor, and the woman who now sleeps soundly in a house that bears one name on the deed mine. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought you'd stay quiet? Share your story below. And if this hit close to home, like, subscribe, and tell someone who needs to hear it. Never mistake kindness for weakness, because some of us fight smarter, and we always win in the end.